Increasing Compliance on Math Homework Using a Changing Criterion Design by Megan Doherty, Sam Cruz, Stephanie Lowe, and David Legaspi. This study used 3 typically developed children. All of them were failing their math classes despite performing well on tests and in-class assignments because they were not completing their math homework. Their parents reported that their children would leave before completing the math homework and that this behavior was escape maintained. It was determined that the changing criterion design would be utilized to increase the number of math questions completed. The changing criterion design is a variation of multiple baseline design created by Wesson Hall in 1971. The intervention has multiple phases that increase the required criterion in a stepwise manner. Several studies have found that changing criterion design to be successful in increasing behaviors such as exercise and verbal behavior. Hartman and Hall's 1976 study was able to increase the number of math problems completed by a behaviorally disordered child when the opportunity to go to recess and play basketball was made contingent on meeting the criterion. Changing criterion design has been shown to successfully decrease escape-maintained behavior in cases of food refusal and the treatment of phobias. The purpose of this study is to test whether a changing criterion design can decrease escape, increase the number of math questions completed, and set an increasing criterion for the number of math problems that must be completed until the end criterion of 20 math problems is attained by each child.
We recruited 3 male elementary students attending Vaudeville Elementary School. They were given an opportunity to earn extra credit for their participation in the study. Participants were attending a 3rd grade math course. Participants were chosen due to reports given to us from the teacher. The teacher reported that each student was passing their tests with ease, each receiving an 80% or above on all other assignments. The teacher also reported that all 3 students were not doing their homework and that the parents of each child had filed complaints and requested help from the teacher. Due to the reports given to us by the teacher, we concluded that a skill deficit was not the cause for non-completion of homework. Previous to this experiment, each child was completing 0 out of 20 questions on each of their homework assignments. We interviewed the parents, yielding results that suggested that the absence of homework completion may be escape maintained. We did so using the Hanley's open-ended functional assessment interview. For ethical standards, the experiment and its procedure was approved by the Human Subjects Committee previous to being conducted. The students were given a parental consent form that was to be signed and completed in order to ensure consent before starting the experiment. The teacher signed a consent form that allowed us to change the criteria for their homework completion to reflect the study's changing criteria. The study took place in each child's home. A chair and a desk was placed in the living room of each home. This was where the student would spend most of his time, according to the Hanley questionnaire. 2 additional chairs were placed in front of the table for the participant's parent and sibling to collect data from. The parent's mom and sibling would be the observers in the study and were trained by the researchers on how to run the procedure according to the checklist provided and how to collect data. They were instructed to report data collected to the researchers. Each section included math homework sheet with a total of 20 questions. The homework sheets were provided by the teacher for the study. Each session was conducted at 3:30 p.m. because the students would be returning home at that time. We conducted this study using a changing criterion design. The independent variable was the criteria that the student had to meet for each phase. Our dependent variable was the number of questions completed per phase. A question completed was operationally defined as a question answered in the space provided below each math problem. Each session comprised of one of 20 question math homework assignments, resulting in 20 opportunities for the child to reach the criteria set for each session. After completion of criteria, the student handed the worksheet to the observers for collection. The data collected by the observers were reported to the researchers. Inter-observer agreement was collected using the exact agreement procedure. Each session was given a maximum of 20 minutes to complete each set criterion. Number of questions completed were recorded at each session. Each observer recorded this data and reported to the researchers. The researchers compared each session's data from each observer for the exact agreement procedure. An agreement was reached if both observers recorded the same number of questions completed for each section. This was then divided over the total number of session intervals and multiplied by 100 to attain an agreement percentile. The equation for exact agreement is displayed as total agreements over the number of intervals times 100 equals percent agreement. For Larry, IOA was resulted in 20 out of 20 times 100 equaling 100% agreement. For Mo, IOA resulted in 23 out of 20 times 100 equaling 100% agreement. For Curly, IOA resulted in 25 out of 25 times 100 equals 100% agreement. IOA for all three sets of observers resulted in 100% agreement. Procedural reliability was collected by using a checklist provided to the researchers. The researchers were instructed to complete each procedural reliability checklist during each session throughout the study. Each checklist indicated a section to check off whether or not each item of the checklist was completed. The procedural checklist consisted of 6 steps. Each checklist was conducted and completed with the equation number of completed tasks over total number of tasks on checklist times 100 equaling procedural reliability. All checklists collected in this study resulted in 100% procedural reliability using this method. We used the changing criterion design for all 3 participants. We chose to use this design so that we could show gradual increase in the criterion that the participants had to reach so that their performance wouldn't be hindered by a demand they could not meet. A baseline phase was taken where 2 observers sat at the table and were prompted the participant with "let's work." We did not implement a criterion for baseline. We wanted to see how many questions would be completed by each participant previous to implementation of the intervention. We implemented the intervention after achieving stability in the baseline data. Stability was achieved when 3 points were collected that were within a maximum of 1 point of each other. For phases with criteria, all 3 data points also had to have met or exceeded the set criterion for that phase. Once stability was reached in baseline, we implemented the first criteria. The criteria was set at 2 questions completed before given access to a break. Since the interviews yield results indicating the behavior was escape maintain, we restricted access to a break from work until the participant reached the criterion or timed out. The criterions were as follows: 2, 5, 10, 15, and 20 questions completed. We completed certain steps in order to combat possible threats to internal validity. Our study lasted for a total of 5 weeks. This length of time was established so that maturation would not be a threat. Every session was conducted by the same observers and included a procedural checklist in order to control for instrumental effects. In order to combat a possibility for diffusion of treatments, we included questions regarding possible tutoring sessions in the consent form. We advised that tutoring sessions would affect the data yielded from the study and should be avoided. History was addressed through the Hanley questionnaire, and we requested that the parents avoid math lesson situations. Baseline was collected at 3:30 p.m. for 3 days in the child's home. The participant was asked to approach the table and sit down in the chair provided. One researcher would instruct the participant that he had 20 minutes to complete the following homework sheet. A researcher would then hand the participant the 20-question homework assignment and prompted, "Let's work." The child was then allowed to behave openly without intervention. The participant was instructed to give the observer the worksheet when he was done working on it. Each student was given a maximum of 20 minutes to complete the assignment. Once again, data was collected on the number of questions completed by each observer. The researchers would graph the results each day. There was 1 session per day, and each session lasted a maximum of 20 minutes. Once again, stability was reached across 3 data points when the data points were a maximum of 1 point away from each other. The intervention phase started the next day. This procedure was completed by each participant before continuing to the intervention phase. For intervention, after returning home from school, each participant was asked to sit down at a table provided. A researcher would then instruct the participant that they had 20 minutes to complete their homework assignment and would be allowed to take a break after X amount of questions completed. The amount of questions needed reflected the criterion set for that phase. The student was also instructed to give the worksheet to the observers after completing the number of questions necessary for each criteria. The session started when a researcher prompted, "Let's work." The researchers were asked to redirect the participant if he tried to escape or made any other attempts to escape. The session was completed when either the participant handed in their worksheet or when the 20 minutes timed out. The observers were instructed to prompt the participant to take his break after counting the number of questions completed if it met the criteria set for that phase. The observers were instructed to individually tally the number of questions like before and report them to the researchers. These two numbers were compared for IOA and then graphed by the researchers. The procedure was continued until stability was reached for the first criteria, and then they would move to the next day where a second criteria would be implemented. In the intervention phase, the 3 data points once again counted for stability if they either met or exceeded the given criteria for that phase. After the stability was reached, the procedure was then replicated with the criterion changed after each phase. This continued until we reached the final phase criteria. The final phase criteria was 20 out of 20 questions completed by each student with stability. The follow-up meeting was conducted where we met with the teacher. We asked what their homework completion grades for the next 2 homework assignments after the study was completed. These data points were then graphed to show if the effects carried over. For social validity, we approached it with a couple mediums. The parent consent form was sent to attain consent, but to also make sure that the parents were okay with the child's involvement in the study. They were also asked if they were concerned for their child's homework performance and if they thought an intervention would benefit their child. We asked the teacher for information regarding the children and their performance in school to see if the problem was occurring also with the child's in-school performance. We did all of this to make sure that all parties involved were on board and believed that the study would provide a socially relevant outcome. The social validation questionnaire was also distributed to assess social validity.
The results of the study show that baseline levels of responding for Larry, Mo, and Curly were all at 0, with no trend, and at the same level throughout. After implementation of intervention, Larry showed immediate changes in mean and level of responding from baseline. He was able to reach criterion levels of responding immediately, and there was 0 trend in his data for the remainder of this phase. For the next criterion change of 5 problems complete, Larry was also able to immediately reach criterion levels of responding. However, he had a decreasing trend in the end for this phase. We considered it stable still, and also moved on to the next phase after this because his second data point was 1 value above criterion level, and his third returned to criterion level. However, he was still at criterion levels of responding, if not above. The next criterion change was 10 problems complete. Larry's initial response was 1 value below criterion level. However, the remainder of his data was at criterion level with 0 trend. The next criterion change was 15 problems complete, which Larry was able to complete immediately and remained at this level of responding for the remainder of this phase. The end criterion level of responding was 20 problems complete. Larry's initial response was 1 value below criterion level, though it raised and remained at criterion levels of responding for the remainder of this phase. During follow-up, Larry maintained this level of responding for both data points were 20 problems complete. Overall, Mo's data showed a little more variability than Larry's. However, he was also able to show immediate and significant changes in mean and levels of responding between baseline and intervention and between each criterion change. For the first criterion change of 2 problems complete, Mo was able to reach this level of responding immediately. For this phase, his data had a decreasing trend. However, since the second data point in this phase was 1 value above criterion level and then returned back to criterion level, we decided that his level of responding was still significantly different than baseline and was still appropriate to move on to the next intervention phase. The second criterion change was 5 problems complete. Mo's initial response was 1 value below criterion level. However, he raised criterion levels of responding for the next session and remained at this level of responding with zero trend for the remainder of this criterion phase. For the next criterion change of 10 problems complete, Mo was able to obtain this level of responding immediately with zero trend throughout that criterion phase. Next was 15 problems complete. Mo was able to reach this level of responding immediately. The overall phase had a decreasing trend. However, similar to the first criterion change, this was a result of his second data point being one value above criterion levels. His end phase was 20 problems complete. Mo showed an immediate difference in mean and level of responding and was able to reach criterion levels immediately and for that initial data point. However, since his second data point was one value below criterion levels, a few more sessions were necessary. For the remainder of the sessions, he was able to maintain and reach criterion levels of responding with zero trend. During the follow-up phase, Mo's initial responding was one value below the final criterion level. However, this was still 19 problems complete, and his second data point showed 20 problems complete. Curley's results show immediate and significant changes in both mean and level of responding between baseline and intervention phases and between all criterion changes. For the initial criterion of 2 problems complete, Curley was able to immediately obtain criterion levels of responding. This phase had an increasing trend as the next 2 data points were one value above criterion levels. However, his data was still stable, and the increasing trend was only slightly above criterion levels of responding. His next criterion change was 5 problems complete. Curley was able to reach this level of responding immediately. However, his second data point was one value below criterion levels. The remainder of this phase, his data had zero trend and was very stable as he reached criterion levels of responding and maintained this level throughout. The next criterion change was 10 problems complete. Curley showed an immediate difference in mean and level from the previous phase of 5 problems complete. However, his initial data point was one value below criterion levels of responding. For the remainder of this phase, he was able to reach and maintain criterion level of 10 problems complete with zero trend. For the next criterion change of 15 problems complete, Curley was able also to immediately reach criterion levels of responding. Similar to the second criterion change of 5 problems complete, his second data point was one value below criterion levels. However, the remainder of this phase showed zero trend and also maintained criterion levels of responding. For the last criterion level of 20 problems complete, Curley was able to immediately reach and maintain 20 problems complete and with zero trend. Curley's follow-up data also suggests that these results were maintained after intervention was terminated, as both data points were 20 problems complete. The results of the social validity questionnaire were the same for all 3 participants. All their parents found it important for their children to complete their homework. They also saw improvement in their children's homework grades and decrease in escape behavior during intervention. All parents reported that they were satisfied with the results of the intervention and that it was easy to implement. Additionally, they all stated that they would like to see this procedure be conducted with other behaviors.
This study explored the control of an intervention with productive behavior using a changing criterion design. Prior to the intervention, homework completion for 3 third-grade boys was occurring at an inappropriately low rate of 0 assignments being turned in to the teacher. In all 3 cases, the participants were receiving passing grades on the exams, but failing to turn in homework assignments. For this reason, the researchers believed that homework was not turned in because of a skill deficit. Rather, the participants were escaping from work too often at home. This hypothesis was confirmed through the Hanley's open-ended functional assessment interview. The intervention was successful in increasing the amount of homework problems each student completed each night. Performance was contingent upon the criterion or goal that was set for each assignment completed. All participants completed each criterion level within 1 or 2 sessions following the criterion change. The results of this current study coincide with research mentioned previously. Hartman et al. Found that making recess contingent upon math performance increased the amount of math problems completed. This is similar to the current study in that escape behavior was contingent upon completion of math homework, with the required criterion for escape increasing each day. Hogue et al. Also improved school performance, but involved parents with a family-based intervention. The current study utilized a similar intervention because researchers involved the parents of each participant. Parents were responsible for collecting data and monitoring timers for their sons while they completed their math homework. Involving the parents was practical and time efficient for data collection and may have had a reactivity effect on the participants as well. A potential threat to internal validity is the history, or changes in the environment, of each student. There may have been uncontrolled variables within each participant's home environment that could have accounted for a change in productivity in regards to homework completion. Although the teacher was aware of the intervention, it is possible that the school environment could have also accounted for some change in each participant's behavior. It is also possible that there were threats to construct validity. For example, instead of measuring productivity, the researchers may have been assessing each participant's ability to follow directions. The directions given to each participant were only in regards to him finishing an expected amount of math problems before given a break. As mentioned previously, one important limitation to this study is the possibility of reactivity, or the process of changing one's own behavior as a result of being monitored or watched. Based off of the results from the Hanley interview with each set of parents, the 3 participants were not completing homework because they were escaping it. During the intervention, the participants were monitored closely and consistently, which may explain why escape was not attempted. Reactivity could explain why behavior changed initially, but it would not explain the continuing effect that the intervention had on the target behavior. Future research should focus on implementing this intervention to increase homework completion, but a measure of accuracy should be included. This current study was focused on each participant completing a set criterion amount of homework problems, but the problems were not scored for accuracy. Participants could have potentially written down false answers to escape from homework sooner, so an accuracy measure should be added in the future. It would also be beneficial for future research to explore changing criterion designs for decreasing maladaptive behaviors in children. This current study was able to implement an intervention to increase productive school behavior, but it would be interesting to explore the effects an intervention could have on decreasing maladaptive school behavior. Similarly, it would be beneficial to explore the possibility of increasing productive behaviors in special education classrooms. It would be interesting to see if these results could generalize to students with developmental disabilities who have trouble completing homework at home. Future research should implement this intervention with different age groups such as high school or college students as well. There may be a generational gap in regards to the effects of this intervention. For example, a change in criterion design may not be appropriate for escape-maintained behavior for older students. This should be explored in the future. Finally, a more simple direction of this current study would be to implement it with third-grade female students. The participants in this study were only male, so for generalization purposes, it would be beneficial to explore the effects on females.